Welcome to The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a production of LibertyNation.com, hosted by Mark Angelides.
If you want to enact structural change within a society, short of an armed coup, what is the best method available? It seems there is a group that, on the surface, feels riots, looting, violence, and intimidation are the most practical tools available. But is this the reality of what we're seeing in the recent riots by Black Lives Matter and Antifa? Do they genuinely believe that the change they ostensibly want can be heralded in through demands of submission and conformity? Or is there another aspect that is being purposely ignored by the media, afraid to face the facts? From the dawn of history, the human race has known how to mete out violence, sometimes justified, sometimes for petty gain, but it's a trait that has arguably shaped the historical record far more than any other. The capacity for violence is in our blood, yet there is also an element of voyeurism for violent spectacle. Look at the gladiatorial events of the past to understand that watching violence enacted in front of us is a crowd pleaser. One could argue that back then we lived in more brutal times, or that the societies that paid cold hard cash to watch the fighters in the Colosseum were not as civilized as today. But then remember the newsroom adage, if it bleeds, it leads. We have to ask a very simple question. Do the rioters truly believe that their political demands will be met by burning down their own neighborhoods? It would take a pretty poor intellect to accept this as likely, so therefore there must be something else to it. Is it possible that, like the Romans of old, they really just want to engage in either destruction for the sheer sake of it, or perhaps that they enjoy the spectacle element of such chaos? It's worth looking at the attitude that we have in modern society towards violence. Ask any civilized person, and they'll likely trot out a pat answer that violence is the last resort, violence is wrong, almost as though it's been drummed into them since kindergarten. But then, look to our cultural tastes to spot the lie and the denial. Millions of people will pay good money to watch boxing matches. Even more fork over cash to watch exciting action movies that nowadays seem to be a series of set pieces, explosions, fistfights, gunfights, strung together with a thin veneer of a story and a flimsy character. But perhaps most telling is a franchise that is as popular as it is captivating: The Purge. This 2013 movie, created mostly by James DeMonaco, began life as a low-budget horror of an American dystopia. It spawned sequels galore and even a successful TV series. The plot describes a fictional future where, in order to deal with the mounting crime, violence and the like, the government allows one night a year where crime is permitted. From murder to torture to theft to sex crimes, the citizens are encouraged to exercise their right to purge. But what precisely is this purging? The premise is that we each have an inbuilt mass of violence that needs to be expiated through the release of aggression. And it makes some sense, especially when we consider the world around us. Consider this: would this kind of movie have been so stupendously successful if it were made in the 1940s or 50s? That generation had lived through a war. It had seen violence and bloodshed, and no one, even back in the home front, had been left unaffected. It seems that they didn't need the added thrill of simulated violence. But now we have safe spaces and an easily assembled social media mob to join. If we don't like someone's opinion, we can have them cancelled, punished, and in fear of their lives, without ever having to leave the comfort of a parent's basement. Yet these keyboard warriors are missing something. And perhaps that is that they don't have a real challenge to face. Of course, some would argue that there is systemic racism, discrimination, or any other ism that happens to be the cause du jour. But a stark and frank look shows us that while discrimination exists in some areas, there's nothing systemic about it. Point to a law that discriminates against people for the colour of their skin. Point to a politician who suggests that because of a person's sex, that they are inferior or less deserving of equal rights. There just aren't any. And so, these truculent and angry souls, they're left itching for a generational battle against an enemy that does not exist. Therefore they demand, on the basis of false outrage and indignation. It's no wonder that we see so many examples of the mob attempting to force private citizens to murmur Black Lives Matter or to raise their fist in solidarity. It appears this is naught but cowardice. Show me an individual, one man or a woman who is standing against a crowd for what they believe, and you'll see courage and bravery. But when 5, 20 or 100 shout and abuse an individual, and all I see are cowards. These mobs are bullies that use the power of mobs to demand obedience and obsequiousness. Perhaps these protesters do not really seek to rebalance social justice, but rather to expiate their own feelings of inadequacy. Maybe they're just bullies seeking power over others, but lack the courage to go it alone. They may seek to make victims of the individual through the tyranny of the mob, but there are brave people out there who will stand up to them. There are people of moral character and conviction who will not kneel, who will not mumble sycophantic phrases under duress. And it's in these brave warriors that a future will be assured.
Go deeper on the topic discussed in this video, head on over to one of these links here or go to our Liberty Nation Roku channel. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for Liberty.
The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a LibertyNation.com production. Available at Libsyn, Apple iTunes, Stitcher, on Roku, and other fine podcast providers.